Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit of things of all things data. It's in response to one of my other prior videos that I talked about, which was a comparison of Snowflake, Synapse, Databricks, and Redshift. One of the comments actually asked us like, hey, can you describe some ETL tools that might work for, what might be the best ETL tools and what would be the use cases. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these ETL tools. Now, of course, for those that are not familiar what ETL tools are, ETL stands for like extract, transform, and load. It's a process of moving data from various sources and transforming it according to business rules, and loading it into a destination data store. ETL tools are software that help you automate and simplify this process. Now, there are different types of course, ETL tools in the market today. You can kind of categorize them in four different types, basically. There's the enterprise grade, there's the open source, and there's cloud-based, and then of course there's your own customized ETL tool, which is basically your own set of scripts and such. I mean, an ETL tool is something that you want a generic version, but then there are times where it doesn't always fit into your use case. So sometimes you'll just create the scripts, or yeah, you'll just generate the scripts yourselves. And now each type has, of course, its own advantages and disadvantages, depending on your needs and preferences. Now, one of the things is ETL tools, of course, the reason why it's essential for you or the business for that matter, or your needs, is that you want to integrate, a lot of the data from different multiple sources or data sources, as we call them. It can help you save time and money, and they can also improve the accuracy of your data as well, too. There are many ETL tools available, of course, I mentioned before, but it's important for you to choose the right one that fits your needs. Some of the factors that to consider when choosing an ETL tool include, like, the type of data you got to extract, the format that you need to transform the data into, and that also usually varies into the type of data store you're going to be storing into. Like in this case, as I was saying, Synapse, Snowflake, Databricks, Redshift, and any other data store for that. It can be any other database for that matter. And the application that you need to load into the data, of course, as well. And of course, the biggest factor of all is your budget. Now, of course, once you've chosen your ETL tool and you're extracting from the data source and possibly transforming it to the desired format, you want to load into the application. So now, there are some aspects of, like, the types of data that you want. One aspect is there's sort of transient data, or not transient data, but more of real data that's more fixed, to the point where, like, sometimes you'll get this data on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, or on a weekly or monthly basis. It's more of time-based more than anything else, to the point where, like, you'll have something that basically wakes up and pulls that data from that aspect, as well as sometimes manual aspects as well too. And then of course there's real-time streaming data for that matter too. Real-time streaming data is more of a case where, like, you'd kind of use a pub sub or some sort of message queue like Kafka or Kinesis or Event Hub from Azure, basically, and you want to load it into your sort of data warehouse or data lake. There are some that you can actually use in the enterprise world, which is the Informatica PowerCenter, IBM Data Stage, or Oracle Data Integrator, and of course Talend Open Studio, even though that can be considered also a little bit open source. And as well as the fact of other aspects of, like, much larger enterprise grade version ETL tools for that matter. I mean, like, and of course there's also the case of, like, was it SQL Server Integration Service, or SSIS, basically, which is part of, I could guess you could consider that need to be ADF or Azure Data Factory for that matter. Now, enterprise grade ETL tools, they're developed and supported by, of course, by commercial organizations. They tend to be more robust and mature in the market. They offer usually a graphical user interface, or GUI for that in this case, for designing that ETL, and pipelines, with support for most relational and non-relational databases, and they have a lot of extensive documentation, and user groups for that matter too. Of course, as I mentioned, some of them were like PowerCenter by Informatica, Data Stage by IBM, Oracle Data Integrator, or ODI in this case, or SSIS, basically Microsoft. Some of the open source ETL tools that are pretty much free and also have a graphic interface for designing and like data sharing processes and monitoring the flow of information. They also have an active community, of course, like a great active community that contribute to the development and improvement of these tools. They do lack some sort, but there are some lacking features for it, basically, like support and any other stuff that integrates, tools that offer. I mean, as far as like maybe multiple data sources pulling in, as well as, as more and more data sources come in, sometimes these open source tools don't support them as such because they're built for something else or for something else. And they also have a tendency to be, more of a case where you have to have more technical skills to use and maintain it, essentially. Some of them, of course, like are the open source ETL tools are like, as I mentioned, Talend Open Studio. There's a paid version, but there is the open source version, which you could use. There's Pentaho data integration. And then, of course, there's Apache NiFi or NiFi and Apache Airflow as well, too. And you could also consider sort of other aspects with it, but those are the two, some of the major ones at this point, to be quite honest. Now, Apache NiFi, of course, is like an open source ETL tool that can be used to move and process data from different data sources. It's ideal for handling real-time streaming data. That's one of the nice things about it. And it can be used to collect and enrich the data en route to, in real time. One of the benefits of using NiFi is its user interface is friendly. It's also makes it easier to design and manage complex data flows. It also has a strong community support because it's from Apache, of course, and there are plenty of other resources available to help users troubleshoot it that they may encounter. Talend, of course, Open Studio is cloud-based in this case sometimes as well too, but there can be the open source version which you could run, where it's also meant for real-time integration. As well as data profiling, provides data quality and data governance, which some of the most enterprise versions or enterprise applications that I mentioned apply in this aspect as well too. Process large volumes of data quickly. Also, one of the things is Talend does offer a graphical user interface. And it allows users to design data flows very, very easily. I've used it in the past, but this is 10 years ago. And it offers a wide range of like pre-built connectors and transformations, which that users can start very quickly if you need something up and running very quickly, for that matter. Now, of course, there's other aspects of Pentaho is almost similar in that nature as well too. To be quite honest, it's not as much different. But of course, that's the open source version. Now, like there's of course the cloud-based version, which is which is hosted on a cloud environment to offer more of that scalability, flexibility, and of course lower maintenance costs. Because the two big things with the enterprise grade and the open source version is you still have to maintain it. You're responsible for it. You have to handle for it at that point. Whereas the cloud-based stuff, sometimes because they're hosted on the cloud, those vendors themselves are handling that maintenance cost, and so that's why you're not paying for it. They handle for the high availability as well too. So it's more of a case where like something goes wrong, you don't have to always look into it. If it's like specifically with the VM or server itself, or sometimes the libraries, they can handle it on their end. And of course, they have built-in connectors as well too to various cloud data sources and destinations such as AWS's S3, Google Cloud Storage, Snowflake, Redshift, Synapse, Databricks, etc. They may have some limitations, of course, of as far as security. Customization is another big factor as well too. They might have some limitations of customizations as well as performance compared to, let's say, on-premise solutions. Now, some of the examples of like some of these cloud-based ETL tools are Stitch Data, Fivetran, Matillion, and of course, Azure has its own Azure Data Factory. And then, of course, there's Azure, AWS's Glue for that matter as well, too. I mean, AWS Glue is another big factor where it's, all of these can basically pull data from on-premise and on-premise sources as well, cloud-based sources. It's designed for highly scalable, to be highly scalable. Sorry, it's designed to be highly scalable. One of the benefits, of course, with some of these cloud-based tools is that it integrates with other services within the cloud-based environments. Like ADF integrates really well and tightly with other aspects of Azure, and AWS Glue integrates tightly with some of the AWS services as well too, like Redshift. ADF ties very well into like Azure Databricks as well as Azure Synapse. So you could sort of build end-to-end pipelines with this at that point as well. And like ADF, Microsoft ADF, it can be used to transform and move data from a wide range of sources, as similar to Glue, basically. Sorry, I'm getting messages. People are messaging me on my thing. Basically, it's like seeing the stuff. I'm like trying to read that. It's making sure it's not important. So, anyways, back to the point. One of the benefits of using ADF is that it integrates seamlessly with Azure services I mentioned, with Synapse and Azure Databricks, you can also build end-to-end pipelines using Azure Data Services. NiFi, of course, is one of the benefits of NiFi, which I mentioned, is that it's user-friendly as well, and can manage complex data flows. But all these other aspects of the cloud environments like Glue, Data Factory, ADF, sorry, Oracle Data Integrated Talent, they can handle complex data flows as well. But one of the cons of using NiFi, of course, is that it can be resource intensive, sadly, because it is Java based, which means that it might not be suitable for all use cases. Talent has that aspect as well too. Oh God, I'm getting so many messages, and my phone's right here too. Unfortunately, that's one of the big things. Unfortunately, that I'm trying to like read. I should be taking this off, but I can't because I'm so deep into it. Now, of course, as I mentioned, the other fourth type, which is the biggest one, is customized ETL tools, which is basically sometimes all these tools that you have in place, they don't fit your needs or use cases. And a lot of cases, like with with NiFi, was originally built for certain things and then eventually started expanding out. So sometimes when you're building out for specific things, it kind of can expand out eventually as you add more and more to it. But one of the things with customized ETL tools are developed by using like certain programming language or frameworks that allows you to create your own ETL logic and pipelines. They sort of, it's very customizable on your end, and where they can give you more control and flexibility over your data integration process, as well as requires more time and effort to build and maintain. Some examples of programming languages or frameworks that can be used to create these ETL tools are Python, basically, with libraries such as Panda or PySpark for that. A lot of the cases it's PySpark or Panda, but mostly Spark, to be quite honest. I mean, that's Python, but then there's also Scala Spark as well too. There's Java, like Apache Beam, which is a big thing, as well as Spring Batch. R has its own set of packages which people are using nowadays, which is DPLYR and as well as TLDYR. And that's not the too long didn't read, it's the TLDYR, not TLDR. Now, let's talk about some of the use cases now for in this case of these ETL tools, basically. For one thing, the pros, of course, ETL tools can save you time and money, of course, improves accuracy of your data, and it can help you integrate data from multiple data sources. Some of the best use cases for it, of course, is extract data from multiple data sources and load into a data warehouse or a data lake. So if you have multiple data sources that you're pulling data from, whether it be databases, some sort of API environment, let's say Salesforce. A lot of the cases you're seeing people pulling from Salesforce, as well as other exposed APIs from data sources that are giving to you. To pull it in there, basically, and pull it into your own data warehouse or data lake. Transform your data to a format that can be used by a lot of your BI tools or business intelligence tools. Create reports from your data, as well as create dashboards from your data. Some of the best databases, of course, to work with ETL tools, of course, as we said, Redshift, Azure Cloud SQL, Amazon Aura, Teradata, Sybase, Redshift, Microsoft SQL Server, Azure SQL Server, Oracle, IBM DB2, Postgres, Synapse, Snowflake, BigQuery for them, or in this case, Bigtable from that aspect. Now, if you are looking for a case where ETLs can handle, as I said, real-time streaming data, NiFi and Apache Kafka work really well. These tools can ingest and distribute large amounts of data. They also have a rich set of connectors that integrate with various data sources and connections. Now, if you're looking for ETL tools that support your business intelligence and reporting and real-time dashboards from various data sources and data sets, spreadsheets, APIs, etc., as I mentioned, basically, you may want to consider Stitch Data or Fivetran, which is relatively new, but it's really, really, really powerful and fairly easy to use, to be quite honest. Fivetran has Stitch Data as well as Matillion. They can extract from multiple data sources, transform into common schema, and load into a cloud data warehouse such as Snowflake, Redshift, Synapse, Databricks, or throw it into a proper data lake in that aspect as well too. They also have a simple, user-friendly interface that allows you to figure out on your data pipelines with ease. Why are they going crazy on this thing? Okay, if you are looking for an ETL tool that can work with specific cloud data warehouses, you may want to consider Matillion, ETL, or Azure Data Factory. they can leverage the processing power and features of your cloud data warehouse to perform complex data transformations and optimizations. They also have native connectors, if I remember correctly, that can integrate with your cloud data warehouse and other cloud services. Yeah, that is true of Matillion and Azure Data Factory, but it's the same thing with also Azure, AWS's Glue for that matter. And for that matter, Google Pipelines really works really, GCP's pipelines works really well from this perspective as well too. Now, Matillion ETL works really well with Snowflake, Redshift, and BigQuery. It allows you to create and execute SQL queries and scripts on your cloud data warehouse using the GraphQL interface, and it also supports features such as incremental loading, data lineage, and version control, which is pretty impressive. That's one thing that NiFi falls short of. Azure ADF, of course, Azure Data Factory works really well with Azure Synapse, Databricks, and of course Azure SQL databases, and it allows to create and orchestrate data pipelines using a drag and drop interface. It also supports features as data flow debugging, data quality checks, and data governance, which is a big thing nowadays as well too, specifically data governance and data quality checks, but more often than not, as well as data security or security. There are some examples of the best ETL tools to use for different scenarios. Of course, there are many other factors to consider when choosing an ETL tool, such as your budget, which I've mentioned in the past, your data volume, depending on how much data you're talking about, real-time streaming data. It's more of a case where, like, nowadays, it's your sensory data, sensor data, telemetry data plays a huge factor at this point. And, of course, the complexity of the data as well, too. That plays a huge factor. And like I said, telemetry data plays a big factor. It's very complex. From a perspective of how are you going to utilize that data. And then there's also genomic data as well too, but the genomic data nowadays, it's not real time, but it is very large and it is very complex. And of course, some of the compliances that you have, which falls into the data governance and data quality as well as security and all that stuff. And also sometimes it's also preference of the user themselves or the users themselves, what they want, or the team, basically what their skill sets are based off of and what the preferences are. Ultimately, the best ETL tool for you depends on your specific needs and goals, quite honestly. From that, I mean, you know, you've got so many different data stores, to the point where you can basically choose the ETL tool that you think is right for your need, basically. More often than not as well too, like Synapse has its own aspect as well too, with Spark built into it. Databricks, purely, it is mostly Spark based, of course. Snowflake, it has its own sort of Snowpipe connector, but they're trying to compete with the Fivetran and Matillions by creating Snowpipe, but they're also creating their own version of Spark too, because the fact is, or not their own version, but integrating Spark within the Snowflake ecosystem. More often because the fact is you got Databricks as a big competitor, but now Synapse is playing a big competitor as well too, and they need that aspect because Synapse is integrating, with Spark, but also has working really well with ADF, Azure Data Factory. Snowflake is trying to compete with that ecosystem and put it in place at that point. But with that, I'll leave it at that. I hope you found this, video helpful and informative. And if you did, please thumbs up or like it, basically. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel for more data related videos and more tech related videos, of course, on some unrelated stuff as well too, that I'll push and play at that point as well too. And please feel free to leave a comment below if you have any questions or suggestions for future topics. I would love to, I thrive on feedback and comments, so please leave your comments in the comment section, and I do read my comments and I do respond to them as well too. With that, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching, unfiltered, unedited, and unrehearsed. Until next time.